So the second law of thermodynamics tells us basically that there is this natural tendency for energy to leave hot objects to go into cold objects. So we've got heat going from the hot into the cold. Well, is there any way that we can get anything useful out of this? Can we get some benefit out of this tendency of heat to do this? In other words, could we have something like this where we actually manage to get some usable work out of this thing? Is that possible? Well, let's think about this. If the hot object gives up some amount of heat, we'll call it Q sub H, and we get some amount of work out of it, W, we end up putting whatever the residual energy is down into the cold reservoir. We'll call that Q sub C. So from conservation of energy, we must have that Q sub H is going to equal W plus Q sub C. And the fact is that yes, this is possible. It is possible to get some usable work out of this natural tendency of heat to go from a hot to a cold object. And the thing that does this is called a heat engine. And a heat engine gets its usable work out of this tendency, the tendency of heat to go from hot to cold. The efficiency of the engine, we write as E, is equal to the ratio of the work that we get out of it over the heat that is given up by the hot object. So this is the efficiency. A 100% efficient engine is one where all of QH is turned into work. Every bit of the energy that comes out of the hot is directed into getting usable work so that no energy goes into the cold reservoir. In that case, work would be equal to QH and E would be equal to 1. But that is impossible. There is a limit to the amount of usable work that we can get out of a heat engine. And the maximally efficient heat engine is one that can actually be run in reverse. In other words, where we take some heat out of the cold by doing work, and then QC plus QW end up going into the hot reservoir. So that would be running this thing in reverse. The maximally efficient heat engine is one that can go forward, but also could go backwards. Let's take a look at an example of that. A reversible heat engine was first devised by Sadi Carnot, and so this is sometimes referred to as a Carnot heat engine. Sadi Carnot was a French physicist, French thermal physicist. Let's imagine that we've got an ideal gas, and we put it onto a hot reservoir. What we mean by this is this object down here at some high temperature, T sub H, can give energy into our heat engine with the assumption that it's big enough that it's not going to change its temperature. It can give some energy into our heat engine, but without decreasing its temperature. So let's imagine first that our system, which is an ideal gas, starts at some state where the piston is at some position A. Using an isothermal expansion, so using at a constant temperature of T sub H, we allow the gas to expand, do work, and it absorbs some heat Q sub H from the hot reservoir. That then turns it into this state here, where the piston is now at position B. We now allow an adiabatic expansion, so we take it off the heat reservoir. There's no more heat put in or removed from the system. We allow the gas to expand from point B to point C. Because it's adiabatic, when it expands, it decreases its temperature, so it's going to cool down. Let's say it cools down from the high temperature to a lower temperature, T sub C, and the piston is now at point C. All right, that brings us to this state here. The piston is at state C, and we are at a temperature T sub C. We now do work on the gas. We compress the gas from piston position C to piston position D isothermally. So we put it in contact with a heat reservoir T sub C. We do work on the gas. It is now going to lose energy, Q sub C. So Q sub C now goes from the gas into the cold reservoir, but it maintains a temperature because it is an isothermal compression. Okay? But now we end up with the piston at state D. With the piston at state D, we now compress the gas. Again, we do work on the gas so that the piston moves from position D to position A, and we compress it adiabatically. In other words, no heat exchange again. As we compress the gas, the temperature is going to increase, and as we move it to point A, the temperature increases from Tc to some higher temperature, Th, which is exactly where we started. The piston is at point A, at temperature Th, so where are we now? We are right back where we started, the position at point A with the gas at a temperature Th, and we do the whole process again. So, what's going on? Well, the ideal gas does work during this position, this process, and then the second process. We do work on the gas during the third and the fourth processes, but notice that in the first process the temperature is at Th, and then it cools from Th to Tc, while the process when we do work on the gas, the temperature is at Tc and the pressure is less, we do less work. So the bottom line is that we get usable work from the gas, a net amount from the gas. We do less work on the gas than the gas does. So we get a net amount of work from the gas. But what are the consequences? We end up taking heat QH from the hot reservoir and dumping an energy QC into the cold reservoir. But each of these processes could be run in reverse and take energy out of the cold reservoir, put it into the hot reservoir. But wait a minute, that is going exactly opposite what we just said about the first law of thermodynamics, how can energy go from the cold reservoir to the hot reservoir? Well, we can only do it then by us doing more work on the gas than the gas has done. So by reversing the process, we are now doing work on the gas in order to get that energy from the cold reservoir into the hot reservoir. For a Carnot heat engine, in other words a reversible engine, we must have the relationship that the ratio of QC over QH, and here we're looking at basically just magnitudes, I'll come back to the signs in just a second, must be the same as the ratio of the temperatures. In other words, the temperature of the cold reservoir to the temperature of the hot reservoir. So QC over QH must equal TC over TH. In other words, QC over TC must be equal to QH over TH. Now, in terms of signs, we know that QC is going to be a positive quantity because heat is adding into the cold reservoir. This is assuming we're running it forward to get usable work out. QC will be positive, while QH, which is the energy being lost by the hot reservoir, is going to be negative. So really, if this is positive and this is negative, the sum of them have to be zero. What is this thing, Q over T? This is actually a very, very important quantity. Q over T is referred to this change in the reservoir. So what is this? This is the gain by the cold reservoir, because the cold reservoir is gaining QC. But this is the loss from the hot reservoir, because the hot reservoir is losing QH. So the gain must be equal to the loss in terms of magnitudes, or the sum has to be zero. This change, Q over T, is referred to as delta S, where S is the entropy. So what we're saying is that the entropy increase of the cold reservoir must be equal to the entropy loss by the hot reservoir, or really the negative, in other words, so that the total change, delta S, is equal to 0. In order for this to be a reversible cycle, a reversible engine, the total change in entropy has to be 0. That's another way of saying this, that QC over TC must be equal to, and really strictly speaking, we should have a minus sign in there, but just in terms of the signs, QC over TC equals QH over TH. To be reversible, the total change in the entropy has to be 0. Now the problem is that isn't really physically possible, because we know that any piston moving in a cylinder is going to have a little bit of friction and things like that. So you're actually not going to get as much work out of this as you would like. You're always going to lose a little bit of work. You're going to, some of that heat is going to go into heating up the container of the gas and things like that. So you're actually not going to be able to make a truly perfectly reversible engine. And so what we end up with is that the net change in the entropy is always going to be positive. For no matter what we do, the entropy always increases. You can't do anything that's going to give you a net decrease in overall entropy. You might do something in one place and decrease the entropy, but the only way to decrease the entropy in this little place is by increasing the entropy more somewhere else. This actually leads us to our final law of thermodynamics, the third law of thermodynamics. The third law of thermodynamics states it is not possible to lower the temperature of any system to absolute 0, in other words 0 Kelvin, in a finite number of steps. This is related to the second law in that we saw from the second law that it's not possible to completely reduce the entropy of a system without increasing the entropy somewhere else. Entropy is always going to increase. You can't reduce the entropy of something to 0. Let me give you an example of this. Trying to cool a system down basically involves removing energy from it. And the more energy you remove from it, the lower the temperature, the larger this value, the smaller T is, the larger delta S for any amount of Q that you're removing from it. Not as an example, but as an analogy, I give my students an analogy. Let's imagine that everyone in my classroom had lots and lots and lots of money, and I wanted to borrow $1. And I say to one student, hey, excuse me, can I borrow $1? And they say, sure, I've got lots of money, here's $1. And I say to another student, can I borrow $1 from you? And they say, well, of course, that student gave you $1, here's $10. And the other student gives me $10. So if all the students have lots and lots of money, you can get money from them very easily. Well, this is an imaginative example. But now let's imagine that the students have no money or very, very little money. And I say to a student, hey, can I borrow $1? They're going to say, oh, I don't have $1 to loan you. I'm not going to give you any dollar. And I ask somebody else and they say the same thing. And then finally I say, okay, listen, if you tell me who has $1, I'll give you $0.25. And they say, okay. So I give them $0.25 and they say, oh, ask that student over there. So then I ask that student and I say, can I borrow $1? And they say, no, I don't have $1. So what's just happened? Not only do I not have $1, but I've lost 25 cents. So the idea is that when there's a lot of energy in a system, it's very easy to get that energy out of the system. You can do that without any problem. But as the amount of energy gets lower and lower and lower, trying to find that energy and get that out becomes very, very difficult. By looking somewhere to try and figure out where there's some energy, by looking somewhere, you have to, to look at something, you have to have light shining off that thing, or some sort of example like that. And to do that, you need to put energy into the system. So you can't even get energy out without putting a little bit in. It eventually gets to be impossible the lower the temperature gets. So you cannot get a system to absolute 0. In other words, you cannot decrease its entropy to 0, because the lower the temperature, the harder it is to get that energy out. Well, that brings us to the close of this course. I hope you enjoyed it. There is so much more to physics than just what we've had time to cover in this course or the next course, 2212. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you will continue studying physics, and I hope you will enjoy it as well. Thanks a lot. See you next time.